This is The Allusionist, in which I, Helen Zaltzman, am currently in vacation mode, even though I'm not actually on vacation at all. But for the sake of the mode, today's episode is a chat with a pod friend, Lauren Gawne of the Linguistics podcast, Lingthusiasm. Her co-host is Gretchen McCulloch, who is an Allusionist from the New Rules episode about how the internet changes language. I know that Lingthusiasm is already a fave podcast for a lot of you. If you're new to it, scoot over to lingthusiasm.com to get stuck in. Also, there is a bumper, longer version of my conversation with Lauren over on the Lingthusiasm Patreon. They've made it available for free because they're generous like that. But if you do happen to have spare cash, support your linguistic entertainment podcast, including this one. The Allusionist will be taking a short break until early August 2026. In the meantime, my other podcast, Answer Me This, is out of retirement. With hundreds of episodes, you can just start anywhere. I'm also a guest on a recent episode of the comedy podcast The Town Show, talking about my hometown, Tunbridge Wells. Then we improvise a few scenes about it. Oh, and the Allusionverse will continue to be lively during my brief pod break. We will be watching the new season of Great British Sewing Bee together every Tuesday from the 14th of July, and we will also be watching the rest of the current season of Bake Off the Professionals. Great show if your particular flavour of schadenfreude is the spectacle of a 5-foot-tall sugarwork interpretation of Bruegel's Tower of Babel crashing to the floor. Go to theallusionist.org/donate to join us for that. Plus you get bonus written content, membership of the Allusionverse Discord community, live streams where I read relaxingly from my ever-increasing collection of vintage reference books. Just yesterday, I acquired dictionaries of cliches and communism, as well as manuals on ventriloquism and how to grade grains. Can't wait to get stuck into these with you. theallusionist.org/donate. On with the Lingthusiasm. Allusionist? Lingthusionist?
My name is Dr. Lauren Gawne, and I am an Associate Professor of Linguistics at La Trobe University, and I am the author of Gesture, a Slim Guide.
And I'm Helen Zaltzman, not a doctor or professor of anything. How embarrassing, although I will accept honorary doctorates if any are being offered, which so far they have not been.
Look, you can only put it out there in the world.
Sure. Yeah, that and a voiceover agent.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
I don't have a plan for this, by the way. It was mostly just a catch up with you. Like, I haven't even set up a document or anything.
Oh my God, how liberating.
I just thought, let's just chat.
Just a couple of language podcasters shooting the breeze.
Yeah.
How things in language podcasting for you, Lauren?
Well, now the microphone is on. Very different to what I would say with the microphone off.
Isn't that the way? I mean, generally podcasting is very different when you have your microphone switched off. It's a lot quieter for a start. The delivery mechanisms are less extensive, but
yes.
Perhaps the material is all the more salacious.
Our producer is like, it's very easy to edit you, Lauren, because I know the moment that you're off mic because your voice just like drops 50% energy levels.
Wow. Has that producer ever run any extortion on you for things you've said in your off mic mode, but on mic technically? That
producer is my sister, so she has an infinity of things she could blackmail me about from an entire lifetime of knowing me.
Well, that's an exciting edge to live on.
Also, she's just the most savage editor you could possibly hope for.
Oh, cool.
It's wonderful. She's just like, no, I got bored and cut that bit.
Maybe that is a younger sibling thing because I'm also a merciless editor. And I think it was because growing up with two significantly older brothers, I thought you can't be bringing your C-grade material here.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes. So The Allusionist is now over 10 years old?
Yes, The Allusionist started in January 2015. When did Lingthusiasm come into this world?
The end of 2016. 10 years in, you're like, oh, we've talked about a lot of linguistics. You've talked about a lot of language.
Yeah, and then they just keep inventing more.
It just doesn't stop. It's one of the best things about studying linguistics is there's always more linguistics for people to study.
Yeah, best and worst, because there's no rest.
True.
It's never done. If you're a completist, you're fucked.
You look at the people who make dictionaries and you just watch them become distressed by permanently chasing is it Zeno's paradox? So like you get a bit closer and it moves further. Like Zeno's paradox doesn't work for actual physics. Like Achilles was always going to catch the turtle or tortoise. Sorry. Yeah, I've just upset a lot of people who remember them.
One of them's wet.
But I feel like with language, it really is one of those things that as soon as you have got to the point of describing where things are at in the year 2026, you won't get around to that for ages, and then things will have moved on.
Yeah, slippery like that.
Yeah.
Aside from having language podcasting in common, Lauren and I have both had jobs that involved substantial amounts of typing things up. Mine, as mentioned in the WPM episode way down in your pod feed. I used to be an audio typist, and I did really enjoy that job. This 2004.
Yeah.
I was working in reality television.
Ah.
And it was great because most TV jobs are having to call people, which of course I dread.
Yeah.
And if you're typing up all the footage that has been shot, you don't call people. It's great.
I feel like this is one of those like jobs from the archives now.
Yes.
What was an audio typist? What was that job?
Well, it's called a logger, and you're typing up all the footage that is shot for a TV show, and then you tell the producers where they can find what they need or what a contestant has done that they might find interesting.
Right. From reality television.
Yes, reality television.
So they were generating a lot of video.
Oh my God, so much. I did like a day or two on a show called The Salon, which was a fake TV salon that they'd set up inside a sort of disused urban theme park in central London. And I just had to watch the live feed of the backsack and crack waxing room. That wasn't so good, but the main show I worked on was a show called Spy, and they trained contestants in spycraft. So you had hours and hours of them just sitting in a shed surveilling.
Wow.
You know, very unglamorous, quite tedious,
Yeah.
or hours and hours of them being put in stress positions and interrogated, which felt off. I mean, I don't know if morally they would do that now, probably, because TV has still got some reckoning to do.
And so you would sit there and watch 3 hours of silence, and then one of them would have a sip of coffee and you'd log that.
Yeah.
Or it was in the UK, so they'd have a cup of tea and then you'd...
One of them chewed gum for hours, and that was just a terrible sound there.
Right into the...
Diabolical.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked that. I don't know if I would like it now, but I liked it then.
Yeah, I can see once you really get into it. I mean, that's a lot of what my fieldwork data is sitting there.
Yeah.
Listening to stories I listened to when they were recorded and just catching all the lines of speech and then typing them out.
That sounds more edifying.
Yeah, maybe.
How long would usually elapse between you recording the stuff and then returning to it?
When I have collected data in Nepal, we've usually recorded... It depends if I'm in a city or a village. So if I'm in the city, I can go home and kind of work on it that evening. In villages, I used to just not take a computer at all and just have the recording gear. So I'd kind of manually write down all the metadata and information about a recording and then come back to it a few weeks later when I was back in town. And even now, when I go back and watch footage I collected 10, 15 years ago, I can remember exactly where I was sitting and what the weather was like. Those stories and recordings and songs that we collected still feel very like I'm there when I watch them,
Wow.
which is really nice.
Yeah. Very evocative.
Yeah.
Are there things where you're like, oh my God, I forgot about that and that was really good?
Yes, usually the things that were proximal to me having food poisoning.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, we did collect a lot of data that day, and then I don't remember what happened for the next 2 days after that.
Oof.
Yeah. The glamorous bits.
It's like the inverse of Proust's Madeleine.
Yes.
The food poisoning has actually destroyed your ability to...
Destroyed my desire to remember that moment. Yeah. There's definitely a genre of linguistic field worker memoir that is framed around how dangerous or unglamorous or food poisoning adjacent working in different parts of the world is, which is extremely just like usually white Western outsider comes in and shows how good they are at collecting.
Mm-hmm.
There's always an uncomfortable undertone to that genre.
Yeah. And then they receive their colonial punishment of food poisoning.
Yeah, or it's like a trial by fire of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, digestive fire.
Yeah. I think the field is getting better slowly, and like it is nice to have more people working with their own communities and their own languages to do their own documentation work. But yeah, that's definitely the genre of like, well, how hard is it for you to get to your field site? How remote are the people you're working with? And it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah. So that's changed a bit during your academic career.
It's definitely changed a lot for a few reasons. One of which is you can just stay in contact with people even in quite remote places through mobile technology, which kind of removes some of the one-upmanship of isolation. But I think there's a little bit more awareness among linguists of the kind of position that outsider linguists have when they come into a community.
Yeah. This is something I've never contended with because I'm not a linguist.
Yeah.
As I think you would be all too aware of, having listened to my work.
You don't have to be you specifically, but you generic you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a linguist to be interested in language. And that's
No.
the genius of the Allusionist. You get to do a lot more of that bridging expertise with people's interests than academics who fall immediately into the trap of, I will explain my very technical thing in immense detail.
Well, you've spent that long on it. I understand why you would feel an urgency to be understood in your lifetime.
Yeah. I think it's one of the best things about doing language content and linguistics communication is that it's a very broad group of people who span academia and media. We ran a listener survey for like 3 years, and one of my favorite demographic facts we took away from that is that there are listeners to Lingthusiasm who identify as linguists, and we also have this massive cohort of people who identify as being just generally curious, and I feel like that's the strong overlap in our listeners. It's just people who are generally curious about the world and languages. Linguistics and language is such a good mechanism for being curious.
Yeah, and also some people just want infotainment. They want audio where they have received something useful that is also fairly digestible. Yes,
otherwise there's the salon to watch.
I assume that the salon is no longer available on the entertainment platforms. How do you find it with making content? I know people are upset by that word. For an audience of specialists and infotainment fans without specialist knowledge, and you have to kind of satisfy both. And also we don't know most of these people personally.
The fun challenge is to do that and also just keep it in a format where it sounds like we're just having a chat over a cuppa. So we have exceedingly long preparation sessions where we just, I wouldn't say fight because we're on the same side, but we like thrash it out over like what is the one piece of terminology that we think is worth people not even remembering, just like encountering. Like there's no test at the end.
No, you should set one.
I do know a podcast that has a quiz at the end. Doug Metzger's Literature and History, he has a multiple choice quiz at the end, which I think is just very wholesome. He's like, just see if you've been paying attention. So we're interested in sharing something, but that something doesn't have to be terminology dense. And then the fun challenge is, how do you talk about this whole thing without too much terminology? And sometimes we just know there's a whole rabbit hole we're not going down. Sometimes we allude to it enough that the people with linguistics training are like, ah, yes, of course, that is this whole technical phenomenon that they are gesturing towards. Sometimes we will just use, I love it when a word has like a colloquial sense and a technical sense. Mm-hmm. And we are strictly using the word in the technical sense, but people don't know that they're actually getting a piece of terminology.
What example would you give of that?
Well, like when I talk about gesture, which is one of my areas of interest, I always make sure to use it in the technical linguistic sense that I have in mind, but I don't tell people, actually, this is a very technical definition. That's usually not what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on some specific phenomenon within gesture. We call this jargon for free when we get to slip in something that isn't like the correct technical word. It's just conveniently one of the correct technical words that's not a fancy Latin or Greek word, and it doesn't sound intimidating.
Stealth technical.
Yeah.
As someone who works as an academic linguist, as your profession, and you also make a podcast about linguistics, do you ever think, well, maybe I should have made the podcast about something further from my job? Like talking about Star Wars films or something, just as relief.
I wouldn't have stayed podcasting if it wasn't something I felt was useful, hopefully useful and interesting to an audience. And it's nice to kind of know that I can dig really deep into the morass of academic literature and pull out the shiny, fun bits for people, or figure out ways to make those bits shiny and fun. But also selfishly, I enjoy taking what I've learned from doing the show and using it in my teaching, or take what I've done in teaching and using it in the show. And like, if I have to think about this all day, I'm already thinking about it anyway. Using it to hone first year lectures or third year anecdotes is really useful. And it's actually one of the most touching bits of feedback we get is when other academics listen to the show and they're like, oh, I borrowed this for my classroom. And I'm like, yes.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's very flattering.
Yeah. When they're like, oh, that was such a cool story or a cool way of explaining something. I've used it in my classroom. I'm like, I'm so here to make other colleagues sound cool to their students.
It's also such a treat when you have something that looks like a really unpromising topic and you can persuade people to be interested in it. But I don't think you can approach that thinking automatically everyone's going to be into this. I think you have to take quite a lot of care with other people's years of work to make it into this easily digestible infotainment that a show like mine is peddling.
I think for me, that's the really technical topics, like finding a way to sell people that the way you structure sounds within a syllable is actually really fascinating and has all these implications for the way languages are put together, or the way that different languages structure. Like, verbs are so important.
Oh, yeah. What are we going to do without verbs? Just noun around?
The verbs are just like doing all the heavy lifting for the shape of a sentence, and finding a way to really sell people on that idea. It's just like, you don't have to remember much. Like, you can kind of reason out the rest once you have this core idea that like it's the verb that's telling everyone else where they need to be, what they're doing.
You've really rattled me to my foundations.
Yeah.
By telling me that people think that verbs are some shit.
Verbs are intimidating.
Really? Why?
Well, there's just a lot going on.
Sure.
When you write a descriptive grammar of a language, it's just like nouns. Nouns are cute, tame pets, usually. Like, nouns are kind of relatively under control.
Yeah.
And verbs just have so much going on because they are usually where a language is doing all of its like tense and aspect. And like even English native speakers panic at a system that they have internalized. As soon as you start labeling it, they're just like, oh, progressive aspect. Oh gosh, past tense, past perfect. What is too much happen? So like, even in languages we feel comfortable with, starting to describe it, there's just a lot happening in terms of tense. There's a lot happening in terms of why can I use this verb and it has a whole bunch of other stuff that comes along with it, whereas this one doesn't. Weird verb fossils like beware the dog. What is happening with beware?
What is happening with beware the dog, Lauren?
I don't know.
What's the problem?
Well, it doesn't have like who is bewaring the dog. You don't say like I beware the dog, you beware the dog.
Isn't that just commands? It's like, okay, for whoever is beholding this command, assume you are the addressee.
Yeah, but you don't say like, stop throwing that.
I might get into it.
Try it.
All right.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, about time I stepped up.
Once you start looking and you're seeing all these things and you're just like, what's the deal with this? It's usually verbs that are throwing you the most curveballs.
I studied Russian, and the verbs in that are horrific.
There you go. See? My theory holds.
Unless you're already a Russian speaker, in which case you're used to them.
Yeah.
But as an English speaker, I'm like, wow, we had it so easy and I didn't even realise.
Yeah. Verbs. Cause of panic.
I'll remember that if I ever want to give someone a good scare.
Yeah. It's be like verbs.
I'll just wave a list of verbs.
Yeah.
That was Lauren Gawne, linguistics prof, author of the book Gesture, and co-host of the podcast Lingthusiasm. As I mentioned earlier, there is a longer version of this conversation available for free over on Lingthusiasm's Patreon, patreon.com/Lingthusiasm, including Lauren explaining how she broke a famous linguistic theory. And you can listen to Lingthusiasm in the pod places and at lingthusiasm.com. Your randomly selected word from the dictionary today is Calicothea, noun, a horse-like fossil mammal of the late tertiary period, with stout claws instead of hooves. Cool. Try using Calicothea in an email today. This episode was produced by me, Helen Zaltzman, on the unceded, ancestral and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The music is by Martin Orstwick of palebirdmusic.com and the experimental podcast Neutrino Watch. The show will be back with new episodes in early August, and in the meantime, if you could recommend it to someone who might enjoy it, that would be delightful. And you can listen to or read every episode. Get more information about the topics and people they're in, see photos of the full dictionary entries for the randomly selected words, follow me on the decreasing number of social media platforms I'm on, check out listings for events coming up, and become a member of the Illusiverse to help an independent podcast keep going, all at the show's forever home, theillusionist.org.